Okay, welcome back. So we're going to continue a philosophy of mitzvot, and we are on page 32. Excuse me. And we are finishing up with Maimonides, although I noticed as I reread this portion of the book that I do have a few comments as we go along, so hopefully we'll get into Rashi some tonight. We have several other opinions and so forth until we get to the meat of the matter. So, continuing on towards the bottom of the page, Maimonides endeavors to show that certain of the precepts, especially of the Hukum, are intended to prevent idolatry, to guard against its false doctrines, and to uproot its heathen practices. Indeed, I thought about this, and one of the hukim, or hookah, I guess is how the singular is said, that I thought about was the separation of meat and dairy. The Bible says not to seethe a kid in its mother's milk. And of course, the rabbis kind of went off a little bit on this one. And so in general, we don't mix meat and dairy together in the same meal, but that's beside the point. But it's, why is that a commandment? Well, some people talk about, meat is death and milk is life, compassion, etc. But in reality, we don't know the answer to that question. So it probably was to help prevent idolatry, and more than likely back in the day, this was a practice of idolaters. Maybe some sort of fertility rite, etc. So I think he's absolutely right. In summary of his views on these laws, he states, most of the statutes, the hukim, the reason of which is unknown to us, serve as a fence against idolatry. Even the sacrifices offered in the course of the divine service were instituted to serve this objective as well, that is, to keep the Israelites from idolatrous worship and to establish the true faith. Maimonides explains the sacrifices as being a general mode of worship with which the Israelites were familiar, and which the Torah found necessary to continue in order to effect the transition from idolatrous worship to the service of God. 110% agree with this. I do not believe that the sacrifices were meant for all times. I think my Reform and conservative brethren and Reconstructionist brethren and sistren would agree with me. I believe it's very difficult. Same way with slavery. Slavery was not forbidden by the Bible because it was so entrenched in the day-to-day lives of the Israelites that to simply say, okay, no more slavery, would have been an unfathomable and undoable thing. It would have led to chaos. So instead, the Bible simply regulates it, and then the hope is that we outgrow it over time. And I think the very same thing about the sacrifices. I think God took us from human sacrifice to animal sacrifice to the service of the heart. And when the temple was destroyed, God was basically saying, hey, we don't need these sacrifices anymore. And when you look at Ezekiel and some of the other, I want to say it's in Ezekiel 42, but I could be wrong, when it talks about the prince, which is the Messiah, offering sacrifices in the temple, they tend to be the agricultural sacrifices rather than the meat sacrifices. And indeed, since part of the way that we will know that Messiah is here and that the Messianic age is here is by the fact that there will be no more violence, and the lion will lay down with the lamb, and so forth. So Indeed, in the third temple, may it come swiftly, we anticipate simply the vegetarian, shall we say, oil, vegetables, etc., being the sacrifices that the Messiah and subsequently the Jews throughout the rest of time will bring. So these were not in effect forever. I also would like to point out that I believe the sacrifices restored the normalcy between God and man via the land or the temple, etc. In other words, forgiveness was always a offering of the heart rather than a bull or a lamb, etc. Whereas those sacrifices, and if you read the Yom Kippur liturgy, etc., and biblical verses, you will see that indeed it cleanses the land. It doesn't tend to cleanse the people. It cleanses the land of all of the people's sin. So it allows that atonement that brings God and man back together again. So anyway, I digress. This is not to be misconstrued as suggesting that the Torah generally acquiesced in the retention of certain rites and cultic practices, tactically accepting them because the people were accustomed to such practices. Indeed, the Torah bans such rites. But I do think, I agree, I think that a transition as opposed to a full stop was the idea. It would appear from Maimonides' exposition of the mitzvot that while his methodology is essentially a rationalistic one, which he readily applies to rational laws, he is reluctant to apply it to revealed laws unless he has either internal scriptural evidence or convincing external evidence to support it. This may explain his admission of his inability to offer reasons for several of the commandments. It is noteworthy that Maimonides likewise does not accord universal acceptance to the Agadic and Midrashic explanations advanced by the rabbis in connection with certain mitzvot. He views such interpretations as being generally of a metaphorical, moralistic, and pedagogical nature, instructive to be sure, but not necessarily reflective of the essential reasons. For Maimonides, the reason for the commandments must be scripturally or historically validated, and ultimately they must accord with reason itself. That rationalistic approach. Let's start with Rashi, the fundamentalist view. The endeavor to probe for the reasons for the commandments, although given such great impetus by Maimonides and consequently pursued by most authoritative figures in Jewish religious philosophy, did not, however, meet with universal acceptance and approval. It initially, in halakhic circles, generally unsympathetic to the incursion of philosophy into matters of religion, that resistance arose. While the opposition regarding the quest for the reasons for the commandments encompassed the whole range of commandments, it was primarily in respect of ascribing reasons for the hikum, whatever their precise connotation, that the lines were sharply drawn. The fundamentalist view was clearly articulated by Rashi, who firmly maintained that hikum are laws for which there are no apparent reason, but which are the king's decrees and enactments imposed upon his subjects. Rashi is more explicit as to the synonymous nature of these laws, as can be seen particularly in his commentary on the verse in Proverbs, where it is clearly evident that he is stating his own view. In his exegesis of the verse, it is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the glory of kings is to search out a matter. Proverbs 25:2. Rashi comments, When you expound regarding the honor of kings or the honor of sages who have made hedges for the Torah and promulgated decrees, you are to investigate and inquire and seek reasons. However, when you will expound on the matters of theosophy or cosmogony, and on the statutes that are written in the Torah, namely Hukum, things which Satan denounces and repudiates, such as the prohibition of eating swine, of mixing diverse kinds, and wearing mixture of wool and linen, then you must not investigate, but you should rather conceal and say it is a decree of the king. An equally consistent and perspicuous representation of his view is made by Rashi in his commentary on the Talmud, on the explanation advanced by the sages for the ruling of the Mishnah, that one is silenced if he prays for God's mercies upon a bird's nest, because he makes the ordinance of God to be acts of mercy where they are injunctions. Rashi notes, these are God's commandments, which were not given for compromise, but only to impose upon Israel his statutes and injunctions, to make known that they are his servants, keeping his commandments, injunctions, and statutes, even such things that Satan and the idolatrous nations seek to repudiate. I will say that, we do not have a Satan as in a fallen angel, etc. In Judaism, Satan is a angel completely under the control of God, but he is the accuser, and that I think is kind of where Rashi was going with that. He accuses and may try to kind of scramble our understanding of these issues. Rashi's view is shared by some of the Tosafotists, and it is evident from the commentary of Tosafot on the above discussion in the Talmud. Tosafot cites a piyut by Rabbi Kalir, in which the poet infers that the command not to slaughter an animal and its young on the same day is due to God's compassion. Tosafot reject Kalir's assumption that it is an indication of divine mercy, maintaining that it is rather to be taken as simply a divine decree. I had this discussion with my rabbi not long ago, after my father-in-law and nephew sold some cattle, including some of the smaller ones, and we had 3 days of cattle bellowing out in the fields. It was quite pleasant. So I asked my rabbi, I said, and of course the law does not apply to mammals, it applies to birds, not to take the mother bird and the baby birds on the same day. But I said, how is that compassionate towards the animal? Because like I said, the mothers were out there bellowing for days, looking for their babies. So anyway, I too would reject the assumption that it is such law as an indication of divine mercy, but rather it is simply a divine decree. A notable exception among the Tosafists is Rabbi Samuel ben Meir, the RamBam, Rashi's grandson and famed exegete, whose interpretation of Scripture is basically along rationalistic lines. RamBam applies the same method of interpretation to the mitzvot, advancing moral and hygienic reasons for some generally designated Hukum, apparently in response to questions asked by apostates. Another Tosafist who sought to give reason for the mitzvot was Rabbi Joseph of Orleans, a disciple of the renowned Tosafist Rabbi Jacob Tam, and author of the Kor Shor, a commentary along the lines of RamBam. He was similarly inclined in order to refute the arguments of apostates and Christians with whom he was engaged in disputations. So I think we'll stop there. We'll move into Nachmanides next, which is the meta-rationalistic view. I will say that, over the years, I have grown. I did like to argue in times past. I have a good friend who is excellent at debating, and we argued, I think, more than debated many years ago, and thankfully we're both of a good enough nature that we were able to continue that friendship. But I don't generally feel the need anymore to justify my belief. I don't feel the need to argue my belief. If you believe something different, then Godspeed. That's your business. We're not all here to please me, and we don't all believe the same way. I do think, though, that as the Dalai Lama said, that while we may not agree that another religion is correct, we do have to acknowledge its existence, and we have to get along with those issues. My only time that I frown upon Christian missionaries is when they take advantage of the weak in our religion, those who perhaps are secular and don't know what they believe to begin with, aren't active in the religion, and then of course some missionaries able to come along and snap them up. And I disagree with that. We're taught the very story about that in the Bible about the people coming along and stamping up the elderly and the weak, etc., that were in the back of the procession. And we're told not to allow that to happen. So I think we have to do the same thing in our religion. Anyway, I've expounded more than I've read tonight. I appreciate your time and your listening. Sorry, there were a few tough words in here tonight. And so I appreciate you putting up with my pronunciations, which I'm sure were oftentimes not correct. But I do appreciate it. I hope to see you back on Sunday, and I hope you have a good week. Thank you. Happy New Year.